I used to have a really solid morning routine with yoga and meditation and just like not looking at my phone for an hour, but now I
That's the
feel like,
key.
yeah, that's the key. Now I feel like as soon as I'm out of the bed, I'm like, no, grab my cup of coffee, sit in front of the computer and start working. And I'm like, no, Char, you can't do that. Welcome to the Plotcast. I'm your host, Char from the Plottery. I'll help you plant little but mighty seeds of motivation so you can watch your ideas grow into beautiful, beautiful novels. Welcome back to the Plotcast. I'm back with Charlene Putney, and we are going to be talking about writing for games today. So hi, Char. I'm also Char, which I thought was a nifty little a nifty little detail. Char and Char are going to be talking about writing today. Do you want to introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and what kind of games you've been writing for?
Sure. Thanks, Char. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm, yes, also Char.
You're welcome, Char.
Um, I'm from I'm from Ireland. I live in Denmark at the moment. I've been writing video games since 2013. Before that, I worked in tech, and before that, I was a biblical scholar. The kind of games I've worked on have been kind of all over the place, from really small indie titles, like things I've made myself, things I've made with my partner. We made an iPhone game called Vitriol together. I've made some like kind of indie games like Nuts, which is a squirrel surveillance game, and the Salt Sea Chronicles, which is about a kind of drowned post-apocalyptic scenario. And I've
Nice.
also worked on some big titles when I was working at Larian Studios, like Divinity Original Sin 2 and Baldur's Gate 3, where I worked for a few years on the core story and characters there. And yeah, now I'm making a new game with my partner, which hasn't been announced yet, but people can sign up at neonaurelius.com if they want to learn more later on.
Awesome. Well, I'm actually a gamer myself. I'm not gonna lie. I love playing games, but I do usually find I'm drawn more towards the ones that are like story based. So things like obviously The Last of Us, and Red Dead Redemption. I love Red. That's my favorite for
Yeah,
sure.
that's your favorite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Far Cry. I love
Yeah.
stuff like that. Life is Strange. Anything that you can kind of get like connections to the characters. But I know Baldur's Gate is maybe similar to that. Do you want to maybe share a little bit about your? I know it's quite popular right now. Anyway, I see a lot of posts about it on social media. But what was it like working on a game like that? And what sort of role did you have when you were doing writing for it, right? Core writing and characters.
So for me, when I found out, like I worked at Larian working on Divinity Original Sin 2, like from the start to the end of the project, doing core story, characters, dialogues, everything. And when I found out that we were going to be working next on Baldur's Gate 3, I couldn't believe it because Baldur's Gate 1 was one of my favorite games growing up. So like I played that I think when I was like 19 or so, right, like when it first came out, and absolutely loved that game so much. So I was just so excited and so honored to get to come in and work on that. So basically it started from the start, writing the core story. So like figuring out like what part of the world it was going to be, what were going to be the interesting things, and then like with the team of with a kind of small team inside the company, like working on yeah figuring out the core story and a bunch of the main interesting characters and pieces that would happen there. And yeah, and then working through that for like 2 years. I did leave Larian in when I moved to Denmark, so I wasn't there for the actual like for the part where it was writing of the dialogues and the scenarios. So I didn't have that part, but I did that part on Original Sin too. So yeah, if people
Nice.
have questions about any of the kind of aspects of making a big role playing game, I can probably help out.
Yeah, I mean, I have questions about it. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like I don't know. My first question is, um, when you are coming up with a story for a game, obviously you need to kind of keep in mind the way that the user's gonna experience it because it's obviously like an interactive thing, and they might skip missions and then they might do things on their own and stuff. So how do you, um, when you're writing stuff for a game like that, how do you avoid sort of superficial storytelling? How do you um, make sure that your characters are deep and complex and that there is some kind of a deeper message going on throughout the
Mm.
story?
So that's a really nice question. So I think it all comes from like it's like building pieces on pieces, like block upon block. So like figuring out first of all is like almost like a tagline for what is the theme of the whole game going to be. Like, you know, what is like the kind of the central message, the central line, the central like kind of question about humanity that we're going to roll around with
Hmm.
this whole thing.
Yeah,
And then from that,
I
like,
call that the thematic argument when I'm working on
yeah,
novels and stuff. So I feel like that's kind of the same thing, just across different mediums.
yeah. So like having that as like your kind of guiding principle, and then figuring out the world, like kind of shaping out how the world that this story is going to take place in. Like that's kind of the first piece. Is like, okay, we're going to be in this place, and then what are the kind of thematic things that can happen inside of this world that connect back to our original like overline.
Uh huh.
And then for the characters, it's really like when you know what the world is like, then you start thinking about, well, what kind of interesting characters could live in this world? What kind of interesting things could happen? You know, when you put a person into a place like this, what would be the things that will have like the most kind of conflict, the most interesting progression? This kind of spaces where every interaction they'll have with the environment around them is going to be like fraught or sensitive or intense in some way.
Hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned you worked on Baldur's Gate for 2 years. Is that right?
Yeah, the first 2 years of the project. Yeah.
And was that so? You said you weren't actually doing the writing of the characters exchanges, but you so for those 2 years, is it literally just sort of plotting everything out and slotting the pieces into place, or how does that process work? And do you work with a team of writers, or how
Mhm.
many people are involved in the process? Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that sort of behind the scenes look into the
Yeah,
writers'
sure.
room?
So I mean, I guess the really important thing there is that it's not like we were sitting working on Baldur's Gate 3 pure with nothing else on our minds. Because at the same time as we were doing that preparation, we were also coming into the last year of development for Original Sin 2. So there was really a lot going on. So, like, we were finishing up the development of one game, starting the development of the next game. So it's not like I was purely 2 years just working on those things. But yes, it's a team. It's a team of like at the start with Baldur's Gate 3, we were like maybe 6 people who were kind of pulling together the story, the ideas, the characters, and of course it ballooned hugely from there.
Nice. No, that sounds really exciting. I feel like when I was the only experience that I have in terms of like writing with a team of people was in one of my university classes when we were doing like writing for television and we were
Mm.
developing like a mock sort of TV series or whatever. But still to this day, I feel like I've never felt quite as exhilarated as that as like I don't know, I feel
Yeah,
like brainstorming with somebody on on a piece of media, whether it is a TV show or a novel or a series or whatever. I feel like it's always just more exciting to sort of bounce your ideas off of somebody.
absolutely. Before I had worked at Larian, I had never worked in a writer's room scenario before. I'd always been on my own.
Mm.
And then like also like afterwards, the things I've worked on that have been on my own since then, like writing wise, it's quite a struggle when you've become extremely used to like just throwing your ideas out there and getting lots and lots of instant feedback to kind of help refine them and shape them and figure out what it is going to be.
Mm. Yeah, it's a much quicker process when you are collaborating with somebody. And I think with writing, it's really good because you have like a sounding board and stuff. And sometimes you just have to throw ideas out there and you'll immediately hear it back if those ideas are stupid or not. Whereas
Yeah,
if you're working with yourself, I feel like you could go on and entertain an idea just because you don't have anybody to tell you, no,
yeah,
that's actually not going to
definitely.
work.
And I actually like this just reminds me of like this thing that's like so myself and my partner we've been making this like I've been making this little kind of AI creativity tool over the last few years.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I really noticed before like working with a lot of writers like to kind of figure out what would be helpful for them with a tool, um, I had thought that like just all writers are the same. I'm a writer, and all writers the way they write is going to be the same as me. And
Hmm.
I found out in that time like there's the kind of writer who they just like bring up everything they have inside of them onto the page, and it's perfect, and they're like that's it. Not like that it's perfect in the first draft, but like but they are expressing something specifically from inside themselves, and that's that. Whereas I've always been the kind of writer where I am like interacting with the world more.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm throwing something out and then seeing what happens and then bouncing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with the page, with people, with the world, with ideas. And then eventually it'll coalesce and it'll become the thing that I want it to be. But I don't know. I think there's something really interesting in like, perhaps it's like people who are suited to a writer's room are this second kind of writer where it's like, I don't have any of this like kill your darlings fear. It's like kill them all. I don't care.
Yeah.
There's more where that came from. Like it's all coming, and we're just going to bounce and bounce and bounce until it's beautiful and perfect and wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think all writers, and now that I've met a lot of different types of writers over the last few years, I don't think all writers feel that way, which is obviously completely fine. But it's just a different way.
Yeah, I do feel like, in my experience with people that I've worked with and people that I've known in the specifically novel writing and poetry writing industry, I do feel like people like that, especially introverts and people who are very like, I work alone, it's just me, we tend to get really like attached to the stuff that we're writing. And then sometimes, as you mentioned, sort of kill your darlings, it becomes a very difficult thing. Um, for most writers to do because they're so attached to it because it
Yeah.
came from their minds and whatever, but
Yeah.
it's definitely a skill that I try to work on with my clients because I think there's a very common problem that I've seen people fall into when they are writing for novels is that they'll plot an outline or something and then they'll just stick to it, and it will be very difficult to sort of grab new ideas and adapt the story to those new ideas and stuff.
Yeah.
And I always find that it's such a shame when an author refuses to sort of entertain these new possibilities and completely change the direction of the story, because usually when they do change the direction of the story, it becomes so much better because it's more developed, more thought out. It's more like it came from them, like from a subconscious sort of piece of original thinking rather than following an outline that they probably set out using beat sheets and things like that, which is
Yeah.
bound to sort of feel formulaic after a little while. So I do like encouraging that idea of like, yeah, just kill your darlings, like you
But
said.
I think that like that is perhaps the most important. I mean, to be a good writer for video games, you have to be a good writer to begin with.
Yeah.
You also have to be good at writing for interactivity and choice, so that things don't feel forced or like they're preordained. And then I think like really the third quality that's most important is that ability to it's really that you love the process. You focus on loving the process because like tomorrow, everything that you've worked on could just be destroyed, taken away, moved in a different direction. We decide we don't have enough money for the art for it. Oh, it's not happening in a castle anymore. Now it's happening in a swamp. Like it's nonstop. It's constant. The change and the shifting sands upon which you're building. So you have to, I think, as a video game writer, you have to be very, very comfortable with just, oh, okay, that's what we're doing today, right? And you just like pull up your socks and like get excited about whatever's happening right now. And if a person who's very, 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 very attached to like precious pieces that you're going to want to hold on to, that you're going to have a hard life in games, a very hard life. So I think it's a really a key kind of like personality trait of game writing.
Be open to change. I like that.
Like not just open, like embracing, like
Yeah.
loving, like wanting almost, like what like coming in like with like, okay, what's
different today?
What's different today, and how excited am I going to get to be about that?
Yeah, nice. Okay, well, I want to know, how did you get to the position of writing for games? What was your first gig? What was your journey as a writer?
So like I kind of mentioned before, I used to work in tech before I worked in games. So I started working in Google in 2004. I worked in Google for a few years, and then after that I worked at Facebook as a kind of product manager type, various different things around there. And when I worked in Facebook, I had started writing a fantasy novel, and I was really into my fantasy novel, and I found my day-to-day life quite depressing. I found the things that I was working on not not firing up my soul. I started to develop like a kind of like a nervous tick in my throat of like just constantly swallowing, never being able to feel comfortable. It was like this whole, like, it was like, I had to express myself and I couldn't in the space that I was in. And so I left with the idea that like I was going to sell my stock. That would give me a year to work on my book and that would be great. And so I did that. And it was really hard. I cried so much working on that book.
Yeah.
trying to get things together, trying to figure out how I could be a writer, feeling like a complete failure in every single aspect of life. And of course also, you know, realizing that the money was running out and I still needed to pay the rent and buy myself food and keep myself alive. Like, I wasn't getting any younger. I was like 2013, I was 33 then. And I played this interactive fiction game, I guess you could call it a game, by an artist called Porpentine. And the game is called Howling Dogs. And it was made with a very, very simple program called Twine, which anyone can try still today at twinery.org. It's absolutely fantastic way of like making short, interactive branching narratives. If you can write in a Google Doc, you can make a Twine game, basically. And I was so excited by this game. I started thinking I wanted to make it myself. And I started making a lot of twines. And then I started teaching people in Dublin, where I was living at the time, how to make twine, twine games, running little twine jams, and kind of becoming the twine person of Ireland. And from that, I got a small gig for a small studio that was in Northern Ireland. They're not around anymore. To work on a game about actually an Irish architect called Eileen Gray, who was making a house in the south of France. And from there, I got a few more small gigs doing small amounts of writing. And then one day, and I was just building my portfolio all this time. And I saw one day a tweet on Twitter from the head of Larian, Sven Vinska, and he said, "I'm looking for writers who can write nonlinear narrative beats. Get in touch if that's you." Mm-hmm. And, you know, a lot of the time, I'm not a very courageous person. And a lot of the time, I just see things that I think I would love, and then I just think, well, it's not for me. You know, who am I to put my hand up and like lift my head above the castle wall? But that day, for some reason, I felt like a surge of courage, and I just wrote back and I said, "Yeah, that's me." And so he gave me like a test job. I got to write like a lot of the barks for Divinity Original Sin, the enhanced edition. So like that was a lot of barks. So like, you know, every time you would cast a specific ice spell, there would have to be 10 different things that the character could say.
Okay.
And, you know, this quite challenging to think of a lot of these things very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. So I did that. I had a wonderful time doing it. And then he said, "Okay, come on in and we'll try you out for something that's not just barks." And from that, I got hired and we started working on Divinity Original Sin 2. And I love that game. I was there from beginning to end and really enjoyed the whole process.
What would you recommend to sort of anybody who's listening that might want to go in this career direction to write for actually video games?
The things I said of like, be a good writer.
Yeah.
Easy, tick. Second is you want to be able to show if you're applying for jobs like with the video games. Like, you don't have to come from games to get a job in games, but you do have to show that you would be able to write for choice. So the way that you can show that is by making a few twines and having those in your portfolio. Because that will show, like when you play through like an interactive fiction, like it might have, you know, you might start off in a space and there'll be 3 choices. Those 3 choices should feel difficult, right? To know which of those to pick, or like emotional, challenging, stressful. If it looks like it's very obvious which is the correct choice, then you're not going to be very good at writing for choice, right? So making a bunch of twines and like testing them on people, getting people to play them and figuring out, is this fun? Does this feel like really juicy and exciting? Or does it feel like a slog? When you have a few kind of games like that in your portfolio, Then going to game jams. There's game jams happening all the time where people will gather together and you'll have like a programmer, a writer, an artist, a sound person, and together in the space of 48 hours, you'll make a game. Then you put that in your portfolio too. And you just build this maybe for a few months, and then you're ready to start applying for, like, if you enjoy it, if it feels good, and if you're good at it,
Mm-hmm.
then you can start applying for roles.
Nice.
But it's really like there is. I saw so many people like in my years of writing just going, well, I'd love to write for games, but I don't know how. And it's just like, well, you just have to do it. Like it's really as basic as that. It's like there's nothing actually stopping you from making a game today by yourself. You don't need to be good at art, and you don't need to be good at programming. You can just open up Twine or Ink. There's another tool called Ink by the Inkle Studio people, who made 80 Days, if you've played that game. And they also have a very easy to use tool that writers can work with. So if you want to do it, then do it and see if you like it. And then if you like that part, do it with some other people at a game jam and see if you like the stress of everything changing under your feet nonstop, constantly, all the time. And if you like both the making of the choices and the game, and you like the feeling of like kind of tension and everything changing, then you're probably in a good position to work in games as a writer.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. I did stalk some of your websites and stuff, so I did see you're also a creative yoga teacher. Do you find that, because I'm currently sort of working on this idea of moving into a more mindful, sort of slower approach to the way that I teach writing and the way that I sort of present myself online and stuff as a writing creator, I guess. But do you feel that it is sort of useful to practice that mindfulness and that sort of peaceful approach to things? And does that influence the way that you write? Does it make you feel like you're more creative or just better in general physically?
So, I mean, definitely, like I did my yoga teacher training in 2015, right when we were starting off, like making Divinity Original Sin 2. So I was spending like one long weekend every month for a year, getting that together. And it was a wonderful like contrast because the kind of space of, you if you do yoga, like, like the space of calm and meditation and even that kind of like that yin inward focus that you can create is so necessary when you're in periods of stress or change or overwhelm or uncertainty. And so it's like having that balance. It's not even like a work-life balance. It's just like a yin-yang balance of like
Mm-hmm.
going into work and being like, yes, let's go. We're fired up. We're going to change everything. We're going to, make something huge. And then curling in, going home, taking the time, doing forward folds, getting into Shavasana. So yeah, I teach, I've taught like a bunch of workshops around storytelling. I don't know, do you know the book Women Who Run with the Wolves?
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
wonderful book. And I've taught a bunch of workshops where we take like a story from the book and then over the course of the workshop, we basically move through the story with our bodies. So it's like feeling the whole story, body, mind, soul, everything.
Mm-hmm.
But now what I do is at the start of the pandemic, I started a class called One Calm Hour. It's on Tuesday evenings. And it was online just as like a place for people to relax and kind of regroup and nourish themselves. And we're still doing it. Like it was like 4.5 years later. We still do it every Tuesday online. It's free. It's called One Calm Hour. It's very chill. If anyone wants to come, all you do is just send me an email. I'll add you to the list. And then I send out a Zoom link every Tuesday and whoever wants to show up comes. And it's just, no RSVP. Don't need to have your camera on. Just come and move and let's be in the world together.
Nice. I really like that. I feel like that's so important when you are a creative person, like to just move and focus a little bit on not thinking, because I feel like as creatives, we think so much about,
Yeah.
what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with that character? What am I going to write tomorrow? What are we working on? Blah, 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 blah. It's always like, there's
Yeah.
always something going on. So I do find it really useful. I find myself, I'm slowly moving back into sort of doing yoga. I used to do it like every morning, at least. And but I've sort of fallen off the track a little bit recently because just been busy and stuff, and I changed sort of environments and things like that. So right now I'm working on getting back into it, but I'm also doing meditation. I'm kind of putting that at the forefront almost as a focus, because I remember when I used to do meditation every single morning and every single night, I just felt so much better about myself because I had like this
Yeah.
small window of time to just not think, to just like be like, no, it's okay, just focus on affirmations or whatever it is that you're doing today, and don't think about all the other stuff that you have to do for work or that you have to write about or whatever, because it gets overwhelming when you are constantly thinking about it and you're not allowing yourself any like downtime
Yes, absolutely.
to
You
not be
just
with
gotta
your work.
be a tiny little creature who's alive in the world and just
Exactly.
feeling gratitude for that for a few moments. And I actually I do that every morning. So I'm just gonna show you
Hmm.
I have my candle here because
Oh.
I start every morning with a morning practice where I do some meditation, some yoga. I draw a tarot card to figure out, what's the interesting ideas about the day. I write in a notebook. I do my morning pages, and sending out meta meditation to all the people I love and all the people I'm going to meet in the day. Like this morning I was thinking about you and sending it out to you,
Oh.
and it's like then I have the candle, and the candle sits on my desk for the rest of the day until it burns out. It usually burns out around lunchtime.
Hmm.
But it's like that sets the stage for a day where I'm not going to be as overwhelmed.
Hmm.
I'm going to take the stuff as it comes. And then it's like, I think like from that space, like from a kind of calm or grounded space, then the things like everything shifting under your feet, everything changing and everything being crazy,
Yeah.
that it can be exciting, right?
Hmm.
Whereas if you're not coming from that, if you're like waking up pelting to the table, getting bang into the day, then it doesn't feel exciting. It
Yeah.
feels stressful and overwhelming, and like it's gripping your tiny little heart in its claws. And so for me, like it's just like you say, it's like when you're starting the day the right way, or the way that feels right for you, everything else falls more into
Hmm.
place. Then
Yeah.
pell mell, helter
Yeah.
skelter.
Yeah, I'm honestly, this is my goal for like the next month, is to like build up that morning routine, because I used to have a really solid morning routine with yoga and meditation and just like not looking at my phone for an hour, but now I
That's the
feel like,
key.
yeah, yeah, that's the key. Now I feel like as soon as I'm out of the bed, I'm like, no, grab my cup of coffee, sit in front of the computer and start working. And I'm like, no, Char, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Take some time. It's okay. The world's not going to slip away because you took some time to repeat a couple of affirmations in the morning and get yourself centered and grounded before you start actually,
Yeah.
doing
Uh,
stuff.
One of my mentors said to me a while ago, I have it just looking up here because it's on the wall on a post-it.
Uh-huh.
There is no too busy. Nothing is urgent.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's one of those things that when you say it like the first time, you're like, nothing is urgent. Well, that's ridiculous. Lots of things are urgent. But then when you start looking at your to-do list under this umbrella of nothing is urgent, you're like, well, actually, it's not wrong, right? It's
Mm.
I don't have to reply to this email today.
Yeah.
I don't have to I don't have to be stressing about this thing right now. I can just take my time. I'm going to make a cup of tea,
Yeah.
do a few stretches, and let's see where we go.
Yep, yep. That's something I'm working on right now, and through therapy and through my own um my own approach to things, because I feel like I'm very much that kind of person, or I have been in recent times, where I literally just think, oh no, I can't take an hour for myself to go out to the gym or
Yeah.
something because I need to be working, because I have so much work to get on with. And then I will spend that hour just doing nothing at
Yeah.
home because I can't
Yeah.
focus.
Yeah. Like that's the worst is when you say I don't have time to go for my walk,
Yeah,
and then you spend that hour just staring at the screen but not achieving anything.
exactly. Yep.
It's something like, yeah, like my partner said to me a while ago, something that really got to me, because there was a time where we were really working really, really hard on our product, for the AI creativity tool that we closed because we didn't have enough customers a few weeks
Hmm.
ago. And there was like this thing where I was like so stressed. I was working so hard. And he was just like, but is any of this moving the needle? I was like, oh fuck, it's not.
Yeah.
Like, I'm working so hard, but I'm basically a hamster in a
Yeah.
wheel.
Yeah.
I'm spinning around, spinning my wheels, thinking I'm doing so much, but it's not achieving anything. And I really think, going for the walk for the hour, that's the kind of thing. It's like in those kind of moments where you're on the walk or you're chatting to your partner or something, or you're in your morning practice. Those are the moments where that actual reality hits you, where you're like, wait a second, am I working on the right thing? Should it be this hard? Am I
Yeah.
supposed to be doing this, or am I supposed to be doing something else? And if you don't give yourself those spaces, then that truth is never going to come in, and you're just going to keep spinning around.
Yeah. Hey, listener, we're about to answer some audience questions. Did you know you could submit questions every month to be answered right here on the Plotcast? You can do this by following my Instagram account at @Plottery and keeping an eye on my end-of-month Q&A boxes in my Instagram stories. Make sure to submit a good one, and we might answer it on the next episode. All right, let's get back into it. I feel like we could get some interesting answers from you because you have a different perspective as a video game writer as opposed to a novel writer. So, a question by Passion Fruit. How do you write dialogue that hits but isn't cringy?
This is a very, very painful lesson.
Yeah.
That nobody wants to hear the answer to this. Because it's horrible. But the only way to do it is to, when you're writing your dialogue lines, you have to say them out loud. And when you say them out loud and you feel that cringe, then it's cringe, right?
Yeah.
It's like but you can't, there's nothing past that stage. There's no reading it in your head that's going to work, because you can read all kinds of things in your head and think, oh yeah, that sounds really dramatic or exciting or glorious. But then you say it out loud. This is really like, you're like, well, nobody speaks like that.
Yeah.
This is not a human voice. What is happening? Or like you get stuck between like two words and you're like, oh yeah, of course, you'd never say it like this. You'd say it in a different way. And the more you say it out loud, the more you are able to figure out what's real, what's good.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think you can tell very easily sometimes with acting, like when you're watching something and you can see that the actors got handed a really badly written script because of the dialogue, because
Yeah.
the stuff that they're saying is like, you can be as good of an actor as you want to, but if somebody gives you a monologue with purple prose to read out, it's not going to feel natural no matter how good you
No,
are.
no.
So, yeah, that's a good tip. I think, reading it out loud, it is very underrated. I think everyone should try that before you do anything else, before you try and ask yourself,
Honestly,
like,
because it's like I'm sure there's all kinds of ways you can be better at writing dialogue, but like listening to people speaking on the bus as you're moving around, writing down lines that you hear people say that you think are in interesting construction or a shape that you might want to use later in something you're doing yourself, and then reading it out loud. It's like you can teach yourself how to write good dialogue just by speaking out loud and hearing how bad it is.
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you just keep going until you have a line that sounds good. And if it sounds good to you and you speak it out loud, it's probably going to sound good to other people. Maybe not everyone. You're never going to please everybody. But to other people who resonate with the way that you are.
Yeah, I like that. And as an editor, I would also recommend just a practical tip of just simplifying things if it isn't working. Like, I think when authors cringe at their own dialogue, it's usually with like really sappy monologues and things like that. But I find usually the simplest line works the best, and it's also punchier. I think it makes the dialogue flow a bit smoother if your characters aren't just like monologuing back and forth and saying all these big things and big emotions and stuff. Usually the simpler, the better, in my experience anyway. But yeah. Okay, we have a second question by Bella de Diego, and she's asking, or they're asking, what is the best way to keep motivated? I feel like I start and stop stories and I never finish. How do you keep yourself motivated? Obviously, you do actually work for somebody, so you kind of have to do the work. But
Well, not anymore. Now I work for myself.
oh, well,
And,
there you go.
so
Perfect. How do you keep
somehow
yourself
even more
motivated?
motivating.
Yeah.
um, Honestly, I don't know if Bella's problem is motivation, because if they keep starting stories, clearly they're excited about writing in general and want to write and are excited about writing. But then something happens along the way of a particular story that they don't want to keep finishing, or they don't care about it anymore, or it's not interesting to them. And I think if you as a writer get to a point in a story where you're not interested in continuing writing it, then sure as hell no one's going to be interested in continuing reading it. And so I don't think the problem is starting and stopping. There's nothing wrong with starting and stopping. Like, kill all of the ideas, as many as you can, as fast as you can, over and over again, until you have something that feels really good and really juicy. Because when you get something that feels really good and really juicy, you're going to want to see it through to the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the fact that you are continuing to write means you have the motivation. You have all the motivation you need. You don't need motivation to finish bad stories. You need motivation to keep writing until you find that really good seed of a really great story that makes you so excited that you want to keep going with the process and get all the way to the end.
I love that answer. I feel like you worded that really nicely, because I try and tell people that all the time, but I feel like I maybe have trouble verbalizing it. Or the way that I put it is usually like, do you know your purpose? Like, do you know why you're writing this? This thing that you're writing, do you have
Yeah.
that thematic argument, that thing that you've been talking about, the question that you're asking, what do you want to do with this story? Because I feel like sometimes if you are missing that question, if you don't actually know, like, why are you passionate about this project, where do you want to see this project end up, how do you want to leave your audience feeling after they read it, like, if you don't have that, purpose, then it's very difficult to actually get to the end and to actually be excited about finishing that
Yeah.
story.
But sometimes you find that along the way.
That's true.
And that
Yeah.
could be the case. Like, if you are a person who starts a lot of things and doesn't finish them, like, it could be that you're actually a seeker, right? You're not starting from a very steady or like specific place, but you're like heading out into the wilderness, looking for something, and you start a story, you don't find it, but someday you're going to start the story and you're going to find the next breadcrumb trail that's going to lead you through the forest all the way to where you want to go.
Yeah.
So
you just have to keep actively searching for it, I think, especially
exactly.
if it gets really difficult. I think there was always a point in every story where things start to get muddied up, at least in my experience. There's always a point where you're like, wait a second, am I doing this right? Am I doing this completely wrong? Could I be going in a completely different direction? But I think it's really important to just take a step back and reevaluate, what are you doing, why are you doing it, and try and zero in on, as I said, that thematic argument, that direction that your story is going into, and then work from there. But yeah, you're never gonna get to the end until you push through, I guess. And sometimes I think for a lot of writers, the answer is to just get to the end of anything and just prove to themselves that they can do it. Because writing a novel is a huge, huge task, and I think there's something happens to the brain when you finish a full draft of something, even if it's, pretty shit. If you get to the end, I feel like you unlock that skill of like, or that confidence of like, wait, I can actually do this. So I can do it
Yeah.
again. I can rewrite it, and I can do it again as many times as I need to, adapt it and stuff. But yeah, I mean, that kind of brings us to the end of the podcast. Do you have a space online where people can find you and connect with you?
Yeah, sure. I have my own website at alphachar.com. It's alphachar.com. And it's not alpha like alpha wolf. It's more like alpha like the alpha version of a product. So
Oh, right.
people are wondering. And also, yeah, like if you want to sign up for details about our new game when we have that launched or announced in a few weeks, you can sign that up at Neon Aurelius. That's Aurelius like Marcus Aurelius, neonaurelius.com. And yeah, I'm Alphachar on Twitter, on Blue Sky. I'm Charlene Putney. I'm charlene.putney@gmail.com if you want to send me an email.
Nice.
So I'm very, very easy to find. I'm the only Charlene Putney, so
the only one in the world. I love
Yeah.
that. Awesome. Okay. Well, I have links to all of that in the description of the podcast if you want to check it out. You can submit questions on our website and leave us a comment if you enjoyed what you heard or if you have questions. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for having me, Char.
Thanks for listening to the Plotcast. If you want more writing tips and tricks, head over to my YouTube channel. Until next time.